Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Childless Not by Choice. Before we get started, I would like to thank my sponsors and my supporters. First, I would like to thank Morgan Air Conditioning, Sales, Service, and Installation, serving Tampa, Florida, and the surrounding areas. Morgan Air can be reached by calling 813-500-7765. That's 813-500-7765. Thank you, Morgan Air, for recognizing the vision of Childless Not by Choice and being a part of it. And thank you for all your work in the community. Next, I would like to thank Alba Digital Media for creating my website, www.childlessnotbychoice.net, and for producing this podcast. To contact Alba Digital Media for your web building and podcast production needs, visit www.albadigitalmedia.com. That's www.albadigitalmedia.com. Thank you, Alba Digital Media, for making me look good and sound good. Finally, I would like to thank Devoted, the musical duo who created my theme music. Thank you, Devoted, for your beautiful music and your awesome talent. To contact Devoted for your music needs, email devotedministries@gmail.com. That's devotedministries@gmail.com. And if you would like to become a one-time or ongoing sponsor of Childless Not by Choice, please contact me at Civilla@civillamorgan.com. That's Civilla@civillamorgan.com. Thank you so much for listening, and now on to the show. Well, hello everyone, Civilla Morgan here. Welcome back to Childless Not by Choice, where my mission is to recognize and speak to the broken hearts of childless not by choice women and men around the world. I am spreading the great news that we can live a joyful, relevant, and fulfilled life, although we did not have the children we so wanted. Well, before we get fully in gear here, I wanted to just thank you for your Facebook reshares and your Twitter comments and retweets. It is always appreciated. And I also want to thank my Patreon contributors. Patreon contributors are those who have taken an interest in my platform, whether they fit the Childless Not by Choice demographic or not. They have decided to contribute a certain dollar amount on a regular basis to help fund my dream of creating awareness and conversation for the Childless Not by Choice community globally. So feel free to click that Patreon link in the show notes for details. And in the meantime, I want to thank my Patreon contributors, podcaster Sarah Williams of the Tough Girls podcast and Mr. Jordan Morgan. Thank you guys so much. Well, today I have a special guest. This wonderful gentleman and I follow each other on Twitter. We have for a little while, but one day I took a longer look at his Twitter profile and became intrigued with his platform. He talks about childlessness from a man's point of view. Many of you may recall that there was a time when I did not consider the thought that men could have difficulty dealing with childlessness. I am so thankful for growth and revelation. Since I've opened my mind to the fact that men can and do suffer, whether emotionally or from society's expectations, I've had the great opportunity to discuss childlessness from a man's point of view a couple of times here on the podcast. And now I have the great opportunity to interview Dr. Robin Hadley. Let me tell you a little bit about him and then we will get started. Dr. Robin was born in 1960 in a working class area of Manchester, United Kingdom. He is the seventh of eight children, 4 boys and 4 girls. Dr. Robin left school, he says, with only a few qualifications, but his wide-ranging careers have included such roles as counselor, deputy technical manager, and scientific and technical photographer for 28 years. He was even a kitchen assistant and even a bartender. Dr. Robin's training as a counselor and his own experience of the desire for fatherhood led him to research the subject of involuntary childless men's desire for fatherhood as a research dissertation for his Master of Arts in Counseling from the University of Manchester. He followed up with a self-funded Master of Science, again at the University of Manchester, exploring the levels of desire for parenthood, or as he calls it, broodiness, in females and males, parents and non-parents. He was a social gerontology PhD studentship at Keele University in 2010. And for his PhD study, examined the experiences of involuntary childless older men and awarded his PhD in December 2015. Post-PhD, Dr. Robin has held a number of short-term research associate posts on projects relating to aging, dementia, technology, and fathers' influence on infant feeding. Welcome to the show, Dr. Robin. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, and I'm really happy to be talking with you and your amazing show.
Well, thank you so very much. I'm glad you're here. And I just want to let the listener know that Dr. Robin's contact information, along with links to his theses, are in the show notes. So please be sure to check those out. I was intrigued as I read them. So please check them out. They're worth the read. As we get started, I should say, the first question I have for you, Dr. Robin, is that for our non-UK listeners, tell us exactly what broodiness means, because I believe the term may be used in a slightly different way here in America.
Right, okay. It's the yearning for becoming a parent, and that can be a felt sense, a biological felt sense, or a social sense. So it's about the desire to become a parent.
Okay. All right. I did look it up when I saw the term, and because in America, I mean, somebody could correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure somebody can message me, but typically when I hear the term broodiness, it also rhymes what I think it means, moodiness.
Yeah, and in Australia they call it cluckiness.
Okay. Well, yeah, so I guess there are a lot of, different rhymes and, slight variations on the term, but it pretty much means the same thing, it seems like.
Yeah.
Well, in our first meeting, our first conversation, I asked if you are childless, not by choice, and you advised that you are. Mm-hmm. And for women who are childless, not by choice, usually we think of it as a biological issue, such as fibroids or endometriosis, mm-hmm. multiple miscarriages, not being able to maintain a pregnancy. And lately, the term circumstance was added. So now some of us are childless due to circumstance and or a medical issue. Mm. So I may be being nosy, but I know that men are listening.
Yep.
And I don't want them to feel like they're alone. And so in your case, what was it? Was it one or both?
It was childless by circumstance, as far as I know. I've never had to provide a sample for testing, so I don't know whether I'm fertile or not. But otherwise it was circumstance, and I can expand on that if you want me to.
Of course. I want the men listening to realize that they're not alone.
They're not alone. Men, you're not alone. There's a lot of influences on how and when we reproduce. And for me, I got married when I was 26, and so I was sort of on the right track time-wise and age-wise. But then the marriage failed for a number of reasons. And by the time I was 30, I was getting divorced. And just before I got divorced, probably about 2 years before we got divorced, we were trying for a child. And then possibly the stress involved with that put a fracture in the relationship, actually what we were committing to. My wife was younger than me, so perhaps that was an element there. So at 30, I'm divorced. I've also kept the property, and the interest rate went up on the mortgage. So I was earning, I'm going to talk in dollars, but actually pounds would be the thing. I was earning something like £350 a month, and 280 was going out on the mortgage, leaving me £70 to live on for food and transport to work, which meant there wasn't much of a social side to my life.
Right.
And that lasted for a couple of years before I managed to sell the house. So around about 34, I moved into another place, a smaller place I could afford, and I started socialising. I found another partner, and we were going great. And again, that partner said, "Let's try for a baby," and very soon after that, then we split up. And again, I think there's a lot of issues about when you take that step to move the relationship on to try for a child, that exposes things. So we split up, and then I met my wife now when I was in my late 30s, and she was a few years older than me, and had made up her mind she wasn't going to become a mother, because of the things associated with being an older mother. And she had she'd been married previously and tried to have a baby, and it didn't work. So those circumstances of economics, relationship breaking up and relationships forming all contributed to my childless by circumstance. So fertility is one element of childlessness, but it's held within a whole social and economic environment. So in my late 20s, I was really aware, and actually in my 30s as well, of my friends and colleagues becoming parents. And I felt really left behind and outside of things on that element. So that's I'm frustrated by that. And I think a lot of men are frustrated by not being where they think they should be, and the way we're sort of raised to be, that we're going to be parents. That's a natural thing. And so not becoming a parent and the timing of that, we're very sensitive to, but it's sort of embedded. So sometimes we can feel frustrated and really not know the cause.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that feeling very well, but I wanted to go back to something you said. I wasn't sure if that, I don't know, there was a little bit of a blip in the recording. Did you say that your current wife has a child?
Has not.
Oh, she did not. She never had children either.
She never had children either. No, she wanted to have children, but it didn't happen. And then came to that place where you sort of decide, this isn't going to happen to me, for me.
Right. Okay, I understand. And so so then that answers a question that I've wondered, because there is a level of frustration, I know, for myself and for the women in my Facebook group, where they wonder why not me, and so it's interesting to hear that men feel the same way, and go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, men do feel the same way. I think it's something to do with the way we're brought up to socialise. Mm-hmm. So men are brought up not really to communicate verbally about their emotions, and women tend to be brought up that way. Not everyone, but that tends to be the way things are. So when men are frustrated, they're also brought up to do something about it. To be active and proactive and go and get things and fix things, but it's very hard to fix your fertility or find a partner sometimes when that's what you want. There's lots of other factors socially and what's socially acceptable.
Right. So socially, I would say globally, it's expected that you grow up, get married, have kids. Yeah. And if you don't, what's wrong with you? when really it's in the numbers. Yes, there are 7 billion people on the planet, but first of all, in the Western world, only 50% of marriages last. And then, as you said, there are many societal issues that come into play that you really have no control over. And and on top of that, men are also raised to be quiet while they're trying to figure things out. So we don't know what's going on with them, which is why I didn't really think about men and childlessness the way I understand it now.
It is interesting that yeah, you've come to that view, but I think also men themselves don't realize it. A lot of the information and the data books are around women and reproduction, and men are just sort of there. They have one job to do, just go and do that.
Well,
But
that's one
actually,
of my questions. So
okay,
it's funny that you brought that up because I'm gonna ask you that shortly.
okay,
Because I really found that intriguing as well. But if you want to expand, please do go ahead.
okay. I've sort of lost the track now, I'm afraid. Where was I?
Well, you were saying that it's interesting that basically the
Oh,
question
yes.
that I had is that women are the ones that are tracked as far as infertility, but not men.
Yes, and that's there could be a number of reasons for that. Could say that since men dominate society, that they dominate women and women's bodies, so they're only really interested in women's bodies as a part of a political domination part of element, and they're not really interested in men, and they're not really interested in men who don't fulfill the ideal man role of being virile, fertility-wise, but also economically, socially, in every single sphere. And that's sort of what men hold themselves up to be as well. I should be fertile, I should be the boss, I should be doing things, I should be good at do it yourself, all I should be good at everything.
Right.
But that's it's almost an impossible thing to be good at everything. Well, it is, I would say.
Well, I mean, that makes sense, but again, we're looking back historically at just how things were, and I think we have to realize that the way things were even 50 or 100 years ago is we're evolving as a race, and especially with technology and living longer and
Mm.
everything else that comes into play, things are going to have to change. Nothing is going to remain the same.
Absolutely, and with more women moving into the workforce, and there's something's going to happen about men being able to do more caring roles and being trained for that, but also for institutions to recognise that, and for socially for it to become acceptable. And
Right.
the other thing I was going to say is when it comes to the figures you're quoting, it's really interesting that we know almost exactly how many women are with children and how many women are childless, but we really don't know about men, and that goes globally. With I think, with the exception of Norway, almost every other country doesn't really keep records on men and their fertility level. So, and how they do this, countries, is when a child is born, they take the fertility history of the mother, but they don't take the fertility history of the father. So when you
Okay.
hear fertility statistics, it will be usually based around the fertility of women in a country.
Right. And
They,
that's on a global level.
yeah, and since that's in the Western world, that's the age of first birth is getting older, and the families are getting smaller generally,
Right.
but it's all around about women. There's probably more childless men than there are women by 5% at least in most countries. But in Finland, they did a study a couple of years back of 35-year-olds. So a lot of 35-year-olds were assessed, and around about, I think, 23% of women were childless, and 40% of men. 40%. 40% of men were childless.
Involuntarily.
Well, they were just childless. They did.
Okay.
It's they can't really measure that easily on big stats.
Okay. So yeah, that was I'm going to go back to the next question I had,
Sure.
because we are talking about this. So yeah, I grabbed this quote from your thesis. You said, quote, research is mainly focused on family and women with the fertility intentions, history, and experience of older men being overlooked. Most nations do not collect the fertility history of men, and consequently, it is impossible to judge the population level of childless men, which is what you're saying. Although involuntary childlessness has frequently only been associated with infertility treatment, there is growing recognition that there is a latent population that is absent from research literature, unquote. So since you wrote that, I think you wrote that 2 years ago, if I was reading my notes correctly. Have you seen any change? I know you talked about the Finnish study, but have you seen any change globally to that?
No.
No.
There are, I think, a few studies coming from Europe looking at childlessness, but they tend to link it to health. And why are people childless? Why are people delaying their fertility decisions? And then go compare across countries. So why are some countries, particularly in Eastern Europe, have a relatively high fertility rate compared to some in the West, and the differences between the North and South of Europe. But really, there is that people like me who haven't been in infertility treatment aren't counted. Involuntary childlessness is very much linked to fertility treatment. So you go to your doctor saying, we've tried to have children, it's not worked. He passes you on to a specialist, and you get involved in treatment or you don't. And once you make that let's say you're involved in treatment and it doesn't work, or you withdraw from treatment, then you're labelled involuntary childless. Okay, but it's very much associated to that clinical position. But actually there's a whole raft of people who don't get involved in the clinical world for a number of reasons, and they're still involuntary childless or childless by circumstance.
Right.
And so there's that whole area of where people may be suffering depression, anxiety, feeling isolated from society, being isolated and stigmatized by their peers for not becoming a parent, and yet nobody's representing them. And that's a shame. All those things happen to people who've gone through treatment. They're stigmatized, they feel depressed, they feel physical illness, social issues. If it happens to them, it must happen to people who don't go through treatment as well. But we really don't hear their voices.
Well, that is changing as of 2.5 years ago. Because, for me, it was circumstance and medical. I had to battle fibroids. And as many of the listeners know from my previous episodes, I had 3 myomectomies. And myomectomies are fibroid removal surgery. So I had 3 of those in the space of a decade while I tried to buy time to meet Mr. Right, because I did not want to raise a child by myself. No. And so that was for me circumstance and medical, which is why I asked you that question in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, the depression, the sadness, the comparison, look at all of my friends, my family around me having children. What about me? Why can't I meet the right person? What's wrong with me? All of the questions that come up in our minds, they start popping up.
Yeah. And as adults, jealousy and anger. And we're not supposed to be like that because we're adults. And these are things possibly we associate with children, but actually they're just very, very human reactions. I was really jealous of one of my colleagues when he became a parent. I almost couldn't speak to him. I'd walk, I'd take steps so I wouldn't see him.
Avoidance.
Absolutely avoidance. Thank you for that that word. That's what I was struggling. I'd go down the fire escape. I'd make sure I change my work pattern so I won't bump into him and things. And I'd known him for years. I knew him before we just happened to work at the same place. I knew him from school. So I'd known him a long time. But just that, actually, we did have a chat about this eventually, because he said, "Look, you're avoiding me." And I went, "Yes, I am." And since we had to work with each other in certain fields, then that wasn't great for work. And I said, you've got everything that I should have and I want to have. And at that point, I couldn't see how I would get it either.
Mm-hmm. Boy, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, and I hope that in a way, I hope it does sound familiar, but it's coming from a working class British man.
No, just basically it's coming from a man's point of view. I mean, that's what it is. The bottom line, it's coming from a man's point of view so that the women listening can also see. And I'm not sure, I know some women are going to feel even more guilty now because maybe they're the 50% of the issue, because, we all know that 50% of the time it's the man. 50% of the time it's the woman who is having the infertility issues. But that's not the point we're trying to make here. I think the point we're trying to make is no matter whose issue it is, we both have the same types of feelings. So I just don't want the women to go away and feel even worse than they do. Please don't do that, because that's not what we're saying here.
No.
We're saying that we both have the same feelings and issues. I know even in my group, I have to deal with, and personally, let me just be real, I've had to deal with bitterness, which is one of the worst of all of those emotions we just mentioned, because I think bitterness really eats at you inside and outside. And so I really had to work on getting rid of that. But the envy and the bitterness and the jealousy, I know that those are real feelings. I don't think I ever felt jealousy or envy. I just wondered, why not me? What about me? Where's mine?
Yeah.
Where's my husband? Where is my child? But there are people who deal with bitterness, envy, jealousy, and I'm not going to discount it because I totally understand it. Why couldn't it happen for me? It's so natural. Why can't it happen for me?
Absolutely. And then you look around and think, well, why have they got it? Why have these, bad people have families?
Oh my goodness.
And why not me? I'm a good person. We all like to think we're good. So absolutely agree with the women who are listening. It's just actually maybe why your man hasn't talked about it. He just clams up, or he goes and brushes the yard, or climbs up on the roof and repairs a tile, or starts working hard and takes more time doing sports or whatever. That's his way of dealing with it in a way, because we're not socialized to speak about our feelings. And it's almost like we've got a concrete block just below the neck and across the shoulders that keeps all those feelings in. So there's a lot of feelings churning up inside, but what we don't have is the words and the ease to speak it and not be vulnerable. So somebody did say, what men most fear is being humiliated. And there is, I think, something in that actually I'm saying this is how I felt. This is what it was like for me. I've done a lot of counselling. I've been counselled a lot, so it takes quite a lot for a man to get round to that position. And I'm sure for some women it does as well. But generally, women are socialised to share what's happening inside. So when I was counselling, or just generally, it's very easy for me to say, "Hi, Civilla, how are things? How are you feeling about that?" And I wouldn't be surprised. So, well, I'm feeling sad about this. This makes me upset. And to revealing that. But when I was counselling men, I never asked them how they felt. I asked them what was going on inside.
Right.
Because then it's addressing it directly, what's happening inside for you. Because men have been socialised not to feel. So if you ask me how am I feeling, I will tell you. But years ago, I would have gone, well, how am I? In my head, the conversation would have been, how am I feeling? How am I supposed to feel? What do they want to know? Actually, I'm feeling really bad inside, but that's not appropriate for me to say that because I'll look weak and they'll sort of maybe have a hold of me or they may mock me. So actually, I'll just say something fairly neutral. I'm all right. I'm a bit sad. I'm a bit angry. So it'll all be lessened.
But if you were to say you were a bit sad or a bit angry, it would have to be with somebody that you trust.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And just a side note, for some who just have not gotten it yet, and yes, it's true, I've never been married, but I observe a lot. I observe. And my observation is that men want to be respected and loved, and women want to be loved and respected. And there is a difference in that order for a reason. So we have to be able, those of you who are married or in a relationship, you have to be able to respect the man and love him. And if he gets it that he has to love you and then respect you, it'll make the relationship work better, especially in the trying times of infertility. That's just a side note observation that you can attest to that if you want to.
Absolutely. Relationships are hard and complex, particularly these days, I think, with technology and everything that's going on in the world. And if you're going through IVF treatment, it's really a strain on your relationships because you're going for a goal that's it's just so difficult that whole procedure's involved with IVF and what it involves.
So it's an added layer of stress, and a lot of marriages don't make it through it. So speaking of that, though, one of my burning questions that I have for you is, and I don't know if I saw it in the research or it just popped into my head. You can correct me, but did you mention that men have a biological clock? And if so, did you find that men have a biological clock the way women do, or in a different way, or not at all?
Okay. They do have a biological clock. And there's a social clock as well. But let's deal with the biological clock. It's slightly different for men than women. The hormonal change, which is usually associated with the menopause. There's a thing called the andropause for men, which is a similar but more drawn out, slow reduction in hormone levels. And luckily for me, I've forgotten what the hormone is, but testosterone would be one of it. But it's extended, so it's like an extended, very, very slow reduction. But the other biological element is the quality of sperm declines after 40. So you won't really find many sperm banks that want sperm from men aged over 35, unless, of course, you're paying for your own treatment, in which case they'll take your sperm. So that's a fact that's not really known terribly well, but it does decline. So the two sort of match up in a way, the female and the male gametes in that element. Socially, there was a research done in Australia by, I know her name's Leslie Canold, in the early 2000s, looking at women who were childless and why they were childless. And what she found was that, as well as the biological clock, as important was the social clock, what your peers were doing, what your friends, your family, what were the expectations around you. That was as important as the biological clock. And the same goes for men. So what I found in my research was around about the age 35 was a peak time for yearning in men. And one of the reasons for that was because they didn't want to be an old dad. They wanted to be at an age when their kids were making that transition from the home to university or to work or to college at the age 15, 16 to 20, where they would still be fully functional. There'd be, in England, it'd be, well, I'll be able to take my son or daughter for their first drink in a bar, sort of thing, or I'll be able to play football with them or netball. But there's definite interactions and being able to do that. And being older was seen as, actually, I'm going to lose some capacity there. But there's also a thing of actually, there's a certain age when you should really be a grandparent rather than a parent, with the exceptions of rock stars, possibly. But even, if you're a rock star and you're age 70 and you become a father, you're sort of celebrated. But if you were working in the local garage and you were 65 and you became a dad, you probably wouldn't be treated in the same way. And if you were reported in the press, it wouldn't be in the same manner. There might be much more shock rather than celebration on that element. So does that answer your question?
Oh, definitely. Because I'm seeing the similarities now. And I think we know that the long, how did you explain it? The extended release of time for the man's biological clock is why men are able to father a child at 70, where a woman would not be able to. But the similarity I just realized is at age 35, because in a previous interview I did with an OBGYN doctor, she mentioned that for women, we know after age 35, it's a high-risk pregnancy for a woman, but also the number of eggs that a woman has after age 35 or doesn't have, the number falls off a cliff, basically. Which is amazing to me. So our we both have biological clocks, but the woman's biological clock time ratio is much shorter than the man's.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. That's interesting to know. And so continuing on here, I think this is opening a lot of eyes so far for people, and I'm just so glad that we're able to do this. As I look at the next question, it says in your PhD thesis summary, you mentioned the research of the 14 men aged 49 to 82. And I'm wondering if you noticed a trend of any type aside from I'm assuming ongoing grieving. You can tell me, it sounds like there is ongoing grieving, but you can tell me if that's true or not, or tell us. Was there anything that stood out or that surprised you about that response?
I think the standout thing was the men didn't say grieving or bereavement particularly. What they said was something was missing. Something's missing from my life.
That's deep.
It is. It is. Just that word missing rather than bereavement or grief. And I think it's actually, for a little word, it says so much. Because I think also what's missing is the narratives and the words that people tend to use around not becoming a parent, particularly women. To have a wide vocabulary women draw on, and it's all they can say is there's something missing, and it's almost like they know something's missing, but they can't expand on what's missing. And I think possibly because what's missing is so big and so deep, they find it hard to contextualize and limit in that way, because they're missing out in the social aspect of playing football, having chats, sharing stories with other parents or parents-to-be or grandparents. And
going on camping trips.
Going on camping trips. So when I was working, I was having a cup of tea with two colleagues who were parents, and their children were about 5 and 7, I think, something like that. And they were talking about DS. The kids are playing DS. And I just thought, the kids are playing Drug Squad? That's all I could think of. So, and that's what sorry about that. Sorry. I didn't realise whatever that was on. So the kids were playing Drug Squad, is what I thought. And they laughed at me. Mom said, no, it's Nintendo DS. It's these little games. And that's an example of how you're sort of not in the loop.
Out of touch.
You're out of touch at different levels. And so I interviewed a fellow actually on my MA, and he was a senior healthcare professional. And he was in a meeting, and they were talking about a particular patient. And one of the other health professionals said, "But you're not a parent. How would you know?" And that was in a medical setting, about a medical context.
Oh, my goodness. So you men get the same nonsense?
Yeah, I think it's possibly delivered slightly differently, maybe slightly more nuanced and distanced. I think somehow people feel there's a right to question women about their fertility decisions and lifestyle, whereas for men, I think they're a bit more, he's just a bit weird, or he's a bit strange.
They just assume because you didn't have the child, and God forbid the man who didn't get married and didn't have the child, he's even more strange.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, I think there's a range of narratives around women who don't become mothers, and one of those is you're selfish. I'm involved with a group called Aging Without Children, and they did a survey, and one of the replies came in. I was in the bank, and the woman asked me if I had any children, I think for some sort of technical reason, from form filling, and she said no. And the clerk said, "How selfish of you." I don't think that would particularly happen to a man who didn't have any children.
My goodness.
But I mean, that is just so dramatic, isn't it?
It's ridiculous because you don't know her story. How dare you?
Absolutely, how dare you?
This is why I'm just shouting from the rooftops, and will continue to do so globally, that this has got to stop. It has got to stop. We cannot be so presumptuous with especially with strangers, but even with our own family members. I mean, even in the group that I have on Facebook now, if you can only hear some of the things that these women are told by their own family members.
Yeah.
Tick tock, the clock is ticking. Things like that. It's just, it's so disheartening to know that human beings can be this way to each other. I know in one interview where this woman is childless by choice, she was told by someone in the church that she was going to hell because she opted not to have children.
Right.
I mean, I don't remember seeing that in any Bible. It's unbelievable.
It is.
That's sad. But did you have the opportunity to teach these men anything that would help them cope with their childlessness?
I didn't. It was a pure research project, but actually, what a lot of them said, this is the first time they talked about it to anyone, even those who were in relationships. I offered to send them the transcripts of our interviews, and quite a few refused, saying, I'm just happy to get this out and say it, and now almost like I can move on in a way. So, but the reason for the interview wasn't counselling as such, although I think for some men it had a counselling effect.
Okay. Well, just a couple more questions here, but one of the last questions is, do you have a word of encouragement that you can share with the male listeners and or the female listeners?
Yes. And that word is... What is that word? I did have that word, and now it's gone. I do have a word of it. Children are one element of life, and life is varied and mixed, and there is sadness and there is something missing, but you have a choice of what to do around that, and that may be to become involved in teaching or getting that whatever is you want from an intergenerational relationship, or doing something else. It's our fate. We haven't had children, and now it's our lives to manage.
That's perfect. In a nutshell, that's what it is. It comes down to choice. It comes down to choice, as you just said too, that if there are children in your life, for me, it was my nephews. They're adults now. But I was just so thankful that their parents allowed me to be in their lives from the time they were born. And I took every opportunity to be the best aunt I could be. And I know some people don't even get that because they have siblings who refuse to let them hang out with their children. And that's very, very sad. But I'm just thankful to my brother and his wife for allowing me to take the kids for the weekend, to be able to clean up vomit, change Pampers.
Yeah.
I was thankful for that because that's all I was going to get. And I didn't even know at the time that that's all I was going to get. I was still expecting to have children, to get married and have children. So as I look back, I'm thankful for that. And now they're adults and they love me. I just know they do, so it's just beautiful.
Can I just say, there's a guy I interviewed who was 82, and he had been a grandfather, surrogate, not a surrogate, an adopted grandfather for two boys who were in their early teens. He knew their father from going to a football match supporter, and so as a school project they needed a grandfather, and he became their adopted grandfather, and he did that for 3 years, and he loved it, absolutely loved it. And he still sees the boys now, even though they're young men in their 20s, and he still sees them at the football, and he said, they still shout, "Hi, Grandad," to me. Hi. And so I did say, "And what happens then for you?" And he said, "I feel so appreciated. It's lovely. That's what I miss." That word "miss" again. Yeah. But he had that experience of being a granddad. So I think that there's opportunities there.
Yes, totally. We just have to, like you said, if we want to teach, and your heart has to be ready.
Yeah.
You can't go and teach toddlers and, have a bitterness about you or, and I'm going to be doing a future episode on that too, that the spirit or demeanor shows. It shows. And so we've got to really choose to accept what we've been dealt and do the best with it that we can, and try it as much as we can to do away with the bitterness, the envy, the jealousy, and, even, oh my gosh, hatred. Those things are not going to help us through the rest of our lives. But so post PhD, You have held a number of short-term research associate posts
Mhm.
on projects relating to aging, dementia, technology, and father's influence on infant feeding, which I found interesting. Tell us more about this research, such as did you recognize an elevated level of dementia or any other negative impact on the childless men?
Okay. On the dementia project, I was looking at I was looking. I was a small part of a team, and I was at the bottom of that team as well, looking at technology for tracking people with dementia. So it was a watch that was also a phone and a tracker, so that an administrator would be able to track the person. So if they went wandering, which is a big issue for people with dementia and their carers, and then they would be able to phone them direct to the phone and say, why are you at the train station? Just stay there, I'll come and pick you up, that sort of thing. So that was a very interesting project. Out of that, I found another device called Dementia Buddy, which is very similar but a lot cheaper, and it's just a wristband with a little chip in it. So if you pay for things with your phone and you just tap the phone or tap the card, that's the same chip, and it just contains a little bit of detail in the chip of your name, address, maybe any health issues, and anybody with a phone can tap it and it will just come up with that that information straight away on their phone. So locally the police and the fire brigade have that, so if they're called to somebody who's wandering, they can just tap their phone on this device, and it just tells them who to phone and if there's any issues. And it's just a simple little device that was developed by a local charity. It's called Dementia Buddy. It's fantastic. So on the dementia thing, it's really, really important about how much family take care of people when they're aging. So in the Aging Without Children survey, they found it was something like 92% of informal care for older people is by family. And for older people without adult children, there's an issue. And there's going to be an issue in the future around who's going to care for you if you don't have adult children. How is that going to be managed? So again, it's about how can I manage this situation on that element. On the infant feeding, that was very interesting how, very similar to the fertility statistics, men are excluded from the information. They want to be involved, but actually go to the perinatal classes before birth, the antenatal classes. When it came to breastfeeding, the men were sent out the room.
Oh.
But actually, the support around women who are breastfeeding is very, very, very important to help them continue breastfeeding. Breastfeeding is very good for the baby and for relationships. And so the lack of information for men excluded them from that arena. And it's very a bonding time for mother and for father. And if father can bottle feed or help breast pump, then they're all bonding elements and cementing elements within the relationship at a time when relationships are under stress. So, yeah, that was interesting too. How men are excluded and isolated in that area, in the same way that because data's not collected about men, they're excluded and invisible because they're childless.
So, but these men in the breastfeeding and the bottle feeding, were these men the fathers of the children?
Yes, tended to be. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, we have a lot more to learn as human beings. You know, there's just so much more that we need to learn. But, well, as we wrap up here, is there anything you would like to add? Anything I missed that I should have asked?
I can't think of anything. It's been a joy talking to you, and thank you so much for inviting me on. It's a great show and a great thing you're doing.
Well, thank you so very much. I'm just always happy to get great interviews like this one. So thank you very much for your time today. And I found, like I said in the beginning, I found your thesis papers intriguing. So I'm sure there was much more I could ask, but just know, for the listeners, that the papers, the links to the papers are in the show notes. If you have any problems opening them up, let me know. But Dr. Robin's email address, I'm sorry, web address is also in the show notes. So that's his way to contact him if you want to get in contact with him. But Dr. Robin, thank you so very much for your time today. And for the listeners, thank you for listening. And if you have any feedback, any questions, feel free to reach out to Dr. Robin or to myself. As you know, my contact information is in the show notes as well. So please take a look at the show notes. And once again, Dr. Robin, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for a lovely talk, and good luck to all your listeners.
Thank you so much.